What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. I am coming to you from Birmingham, Alabama. So glad you decided to join us today. We have a great guest, like we always do. We always interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout this country. Today's no different. We have my good friend, Mr. Ryan Stewart, on the show. Ryan is the founder of Beast Mode Sales, and we're going to talk about how to talk to sellers, how to sell. And Ryan, you're the guy that's going to get this done. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you having me on the show, and definitely excited to be here.
So Ryan, Fortune 100 top consultant. You were in the corporate sales industry for 20 plus years. You obviously have some sales experience. So let's kind of just start right there. How did you get into, was sales just in your blood? I hear that all the time, that a great salesperson is just born that way. Was it just in your blood, or did you have to actually go through training to learn how to sell?
I think the answer is both. I don't think anybody wakes up one day and decides that when they grow up, they want to be in sales. It wasn't, I come from a family full of professionals. My dad's a doctor. His brothers are all doctors or attorneys. And so I was kind of the guy the apple that fell away from the apple tree a little bit. And, when you say, are you born for it? I think there's a couple things that play into sales that can't be taught. I think number one, the ability to communicate. So the amount of English words that the command that you have of the English language makes a big difference. Also empathy. One thing I've never been able to teach people is empathy. How to really put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it requires, I believe it requires a lot of personal development. You've got to be able to look inside and really ask yourself tough questions, and you've got to become very comfortable with yourself. And then, of course, if you're comfortable, they're comfortable. If you're uneasy, then your client is going to be uneasy. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people have when they first think about sales is they think, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do that in a certain way. The truth is sales is just a conversation. And if you know how to have the conversation, it's easy. If you don't know how to have the conversation, it's a struggle. And, I think we've overcomplicated sales. At the end of the day, it's about helping a customer or helping a client make a decision to buy. So in real estate, for instance, it's helping the seller come to a decision that he or she should sell the home for a particular price. It's no different. The product doesn't matter. It's just how you approach the whole process from engagement all the way to the closing process. And I try to stay away from using too many terms like closing and tie down and all of these things. They've become overwhelming for people that aren't experts in sales. You don't need to know all those technical terms. You just need to understand the psychology behind the sales process, and you need to understand the psychology of what the person is feeling and thinking that's sitting across from you. For me, that was honed in over 10,000 one-on-one consultations. I tell people it takes, 10,000 tries at anything to become an expert. I have had, in the last 22 years, I've had over 10,000 one-on-one consultations. So I don't know anybody in my network that's had that many sit-downs. And for me, what that did is it allowed me to sharpen that saw over and over and over again. Dr. Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw and how important that is. And if you're not in a situation where I was working for Sears for over a decade and they're giving me 3 to 5 appointments a day, it's very difficult to sharpen that saw on a regular basis. With real estate, I think you can sharpen it more than most because it's up to you as far as how many people you want to put yourself in front of on a daily basis. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me was the advantage of having all of those repeated encounters over and over again and really dialing in that conversation to figure out what I needed to say and what I needed to do, and more importantly, how I needed to be in order to help that person make a decision to move forward.
Ryan, you said something that really took me aback a second ago when you said that there are portions of sales that you think cannot be taught. Because obviously, if you train other people how to sell. Obviously not through your company, Beast Mode Sales, but also you're probably doing it at the corporate level too. You're training new hires potentially. Mm-hmm. So you've trained probably a lot of people, or at least tried to teach a lot of people how to sell. And you said something very alarming to me, that there are a couple of things that cannot be taught, which you mentioned too: communication, how to communicate, and empathy.
Mhm.
So if those two are the two of the things that you don't think can be taught, those are obviously, you name those two things, those are obviously two important things when it comes to sales. I want you to specifically talk about both of those 2 points. Are those the two most important things in sales? How to communicate and empathy?
Yeah, so they're definitely at the top of the list. I would think empathy is number one. As far as communication goes, you can get away with less than perfect communication. Most people, aren't experts at the English language, but you need to know that the terms that you're throwing out there, you need to know exactly what they mean, and be able to explain those in layman's terms. The empathy portion, empathy is really putting yourself in someone else's shoes and actually feeling what they're feeling, right? And as men, we're a little more cut off from our feelings than women. Women seem to have a little bit easier time with the empathy side of things on sales. They're more connected with who they really are, not so connected here as much as men. We're driven by this. We should be driven by this, but our minds get in the way. So I think as far as empathy is concerned, it's just one of those things that you have to quiet your mind. You have to understand the key to empathy and becoming, I guess, if you can teach yourself in becoming more empathetic, is viewing the sales process differently. So I guess the way I can say that is how you're being with your client is way more important than what you're saying. It doesn't matter. People they only hear what they're wanting to hear and what they're looking to hear. But what they feel is the biggest difference. If I sit down with you and you're a client and I'm taking you through a process and I'm helping you understand what I can do for you in your home, if you don't sense that I'm absolutely confident and absolutely certain, the odds of you wanting to move forward with me are significantly diminished. If you don't sense that I truly understand and truly care about what it is that you need to do, what your challenges are, what your obstacles are to get you, whatever it is you're trying to get, if you're trying to sell the house quickly or whatever, you've got to really take the time and ask the right questions and listen to what they're saying. And that's the most difficult part when people first start doing this in sales, whether it's in real estate or any other product. The first thing they start doing when the client is talking to them is they start thinking about how they're going to respond. In their head, they're thinking, what angle should I play? How should I come at this? You have to turn the thinking mind completely off. The only problem that exists in sales is right here. If me and my client could both take our brains and put them out on the table, we would be in perfect harmony and perfect communication, and we wouldn't need words to understand. So this thing can really get in the way, and you just have to understand that, people, as a salesperson, you might think, wow, I'm nervous. This is my first time doing this. Well, guess what? The homeowner's a little bit nervous too. They've never met you. And anytime you meet a complete stranger, that can be a little nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So you just have to understand, this is a person that needs help. I'm here to help them. And you also have to understand that the reason that you're there may have absolutely nothing to do with real estate or with your particular product. You might be there for a counseling session. You might be there just to be a mirror, just so that they can vent and they can talk to you. A lot of times I've realized that people just need someone to talk to. Nowadays we're so distracted by this. It's like you're having a conversation with somebody, they're looking down at their phone. You don't feel like you're being heard. So when you're engaged with somebody one-on-one and they don't feel that there's any distractions, you may be the first person that truly wanted to listen to them in a very long time. And that's a big deal. And those are the types of things that allow you to connect with that person and really make them know that you care and really want to allow you to help them. They've got to be open to receiving your assistance, and they're only going to do that if they feel totally comfortable with you and totally confident that you know what you're doing.
So that's really good stuff. I completely agree with you for sure about that. And I'm no expert, but that's definitely something I've learned for sure. Being a good listener, having empathy. Empathy, I feel like, is one of my greatest strengths. Is trying to put myself in other people's shoes. Thank you. Appreciate that. But you mentioned something too. You gave me a lot of notes in that first answer. You mentioned the psychology of sales, the psychology of the sales process. Is sales mostly just psychology?
Yeah, 100%.
So it's almost all psychology. Like, break that down. What does that even mean? If it's psychological, if sales is psychological, what does that actually mean?
So when people communicate, they have natural communication methods. Like, for instance, if I tell you the sky looks really blue today, you probably will look up there and go, yeah, it kind of looks a little green too. In natural communication, people always want to offer opposing statements or comments, not because they're trying to be combative, just because they're trying to carry on a good conversation. So you have to really think about where they are. You have to meet them where they are, and then you have to take them down the yellow brick road, which is from where they are to where they want to be with the least amount of pain possible. Forgive me, I just kind of got sidetracked. I heard my dog in the background. Remind me of the question one more time.
No, it's all good. Like, what does it mean? Like, what does that mean if sales is psychological? Like, what does that mean?
So let me give you an example. If I meet a person, let's take what we call a tone scale, 1 to 10, okay? And if I meet a person and their energy level is at a 6, meaning they're not negative, they're not below 5, but they're not really that positive either. If I meet that person, whoever has the most energy, whoever carries the most part of their being and essence with them, that person's always going to influence the other person. So if the person you're dealing with is at a 6 and you come in and you're at a 10, hey, Brian, thanks so much for having me out, man. It's great to meet you. You've lost already. You're gone. They've turned you off. They can't hang and they can't relate. And man, they wish they had your energy, but they don't know what to do with it. So it's over. So in order to get a person, what I call up the tone scale, when people make decisions to buy, they're in an emotional state. And typically you need to get them to an 8, 9, or 10 before they're ready to commit. If I meet somebody and they're at a 6 on an emotional scale, I've got to meet them either right where they are at a 6 or maybe even a little bit lower. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you've got a guy that's just totally negative. You meet with him. Hey, I'm Ryan. Brian, nice to meet you. Understand you're trying to sell your house. And the guy says, yeah, I just, I haven't been able to get any good offers. And man, I'm just so sick of all this. And I just don't even know if it's worth the effort. Most salespeople would think that they now need to engage them and start trying to convince them of why it's a good idea. When the truth is, psychologically, the best thing you can do is agree with them and say, yeah, I just don't know if there's any hope. I mean, honestly, Brian, I'm sorry, man. After what you told me, you've got me sold. I don't think there's any hope. I think we should stop this right now, And you're laughing, and that's exactly what the client's going to do because they're hearing the exact opposite of what they expected to hear. And because of communication patterns, they automatically are going to say, oh, wait a second, Ryan, no, it's not that bad. It's just this and this and this. So they start minimizing how bad things are. And next thing you know, you're pushing them from a level 5 or a level 6 up the tone scale gradually until you've built enough rapport. And then at that point, they're going to be comfortable enough to make a decision to move forward. So it's kind of the way I started learning this type of sales process. It's defined as negative reverse sell, and it was something I learned at a sales training that I took many, many years ago with a guy named David H. Sandler. It was actually a $30,000 sales training program that I got for free when I was 19 years old. So I memorized it, right? I mean, it's like finding, gold. And a big part of what he taught was the negative reverse sell process. And the way that I had to start implementing it is to say the exact opposite of what people thought that you should say, or the exact opposite of what you thought people wanted to hear. Like you go out to a house, you're doing a walk around, and the guy says, man, you say, oh man, this siding, how old is this? Wow, it looks like we're going to probably have to replace this vinyl siding. And the guy says, well, how much is that going to be? And he's all worked up about it. Well, I mean, it's going to be no less than 100,000, but we'll get to that later. You throw out something ridiculous. What do you mean it's going to be $100,000? Jim, I'm just messing with you, man. Just messing with you. Relax. I'm just being funny. But what you're doing is you're getting them loosened up and you're getting them to not take things so seriously, And that goes back to being present. So if you really want me to sum up psychology, I can sum it up in one word, and that is presence. Are you here or are you somewhere else mentally? And in the sales process, it's no different than life. You're either focused on what was just said or you're focused on the outcome that you're hoping to achieve, rather than being focused on the moment and focused on exactly what that person is telling you. Yeah. And for me, it goes back to my belief system, my faith. Is this person just another random person that showed up in my life that I'm trying to make a sale with? Or has this person been sent to me, or is it determined that we were supposed to cross paths? And if so, how am I supposed to help this person? Now I'm completely open. Now I'm no longer focused on the outcome. I'm focused on what's happening right now. I'm being present. And that's the most difficult thing for people to do, is to remain present. And that's what causes all the stress and anxiety in life, is people being stuck either living through memories or eager anticipation for the future. When I get there, it's going to be great. When I make $1 million, it's going to be great. When I get in that big house, it's going to be great. And we start living as a projection in the future. Yeah. Nothing is currently happening in the future, and nothing is happening in the past. The only time things ever happen is right now. So tomorrow will just be a new now. So all we have is today, right? So I just stay focused on the day. Like, for instance, right now we're on a podcast. I don't have anything scripted. You and I did not talk about questions or anything like that. I'm in the moment because I truly want to be in the moment with you, because this is where life happens. The only thing that's real right now is what we're doing. So that's the psychology. If you can kind of put it in your head that you're there for more than just to make a sale, then the sale or the contract, whatever it is, becomes secondary. Your primary purpose is to figure out, how can I best help this person? How can I best serve this person? And that might mean directing them to somebody else, and you have no opportunity to make a sale. That's fine. Do it. That's what you should do. You should give people what they need, not what you want, but what they need. And you need to help them to see that. And the only way you can do that is if you connect one-on-one personally. And real estate's the greatest way, I think, to sharpen that sword outside of having a regular corporate job like I did, where they're feeding you 3 to 5 leads a day. In real estate, man, you can have a lot of calls, you can have a lot of in-persons. It's just a matter of how motivated you are and how much you want to get out there and make it happen. So same principles apply, whether it's real estate or any other product.
That's great stuff. You said earlier that people have to be in an emotional state in order to buy. Buying is an emotional decision. What is that? Practically speaking, what does that mean?
Well, people say you shouldn't make decisions when you're emotionally involved. And I think that's the only time to make a decision. When you attach emotion to something, it's meaningful. So, when if there's no urgency, if they're at a level 5 or a level 6 when I meet them, and they have no urgency, if I leave them at that level all the way through the process and we get to the end and I say, so what do you think? The likelihood of them taking action in that moment is very small. But if I've been able to take them up the emotional tone scale and get them up to a 7, 8, 9, or 10, the likelihood that they're going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do something now is much higher.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I hear, you hear guys like Tony Robbins, you hear guys like that saying that people make decisions in an instant, and they're typically like emotional decisions. But practically speaking, the practical application of a phrase like that, it's really the practicality of it, is what I hear you saying, is just making sure you're getting them to that point. And it's a process. And you said earlier that sales is a process. What define that? Ryan, what does that mean that sales is a process? Is it just what you just got done saying, trying to get them up that scale?
Yeah, so let me give you an example. Hey, Brian, I'm Ryan. Nice to meet you. Hey, you should buy all my stuff. It's really cool. Right? That's how a lot of sales processes go. It's, hey, how you doing? Buy my stuff. Like, that's not how a normal conversation goes. When you meet someone, you don't say, hey, I'm Ryan and I sell water systems and they're really awesome and you should buy all of it, right? They're going to look at me and go, who are you? What do I care? I don't care about any of that. So it's all about having a normal conversation with somebody. The book that I'm currently writing is called It's Just a Conversation. It's just a conversation. And the purpose of the book is to end the suffering that is taking place between salespeople and their clients. There is a lot of unnecessary suffering going on.
Is that, Ryan, I'm sorry to cut you off. Is that suffering happening just because people are not having a conversation? Like you were saying, they're just kind of cutting right to the chase and not going through an actual process? That's it. You're better off not even focusing on a sales process and just focusing on having a good conversation with that person. If you focus on them and who they are and what they need and how you can help them, and think about it in broader terms, not how you can help them sell their home, but how can you help them in general?
They might start talking to you about something that's going on in their family. Maybe it's a family member that they're struggling with. If you hear something that you can personally relate to and you can share your experience and become transparent about that, for instance, Judy, I understand where you're at with your son-in-law. I know how difficult it is when you want people to stop drinking, but it's like they don't listen. They can't hear. Everybody's trying to help them. And, Judy, to be honest with you, I have a lot of experience with that. 21 years ago, I got sober and, it changed my life. I went through Alcoholics Anonymous and I got a sponsor, and I'll actually take them through that process and make it okay. People need permission to be transparent. And the only way that they feel they have permission to be transparent is if you are open and you are transparent with them. So as soon as you hear something going on with them, go into it more deeply. Don't think, oh, this is getting me sidetracked and I need to stay focused on doing the deal. Forget about the deal. Just go down that rabbit hole with them. Let's talk more about that. And it's not that you want to stay down that rabbit hole, because that's not where they want to be, but you're going to spend enough time focused on what's most important to them in their life. And you're going to build so much rapport just because you're having a normal conversation, and you may be the first human being that actually has listened. I mean, really listened to what they're trying to say in a very long time. And after doing over 10,000 one-on-one consultations, I can tell you, I know immediately when I sit down with a person, I know right where they are, and if it's somebody that nobody's been listening to for a long time, I can see it all over them. And all I have to do is ask them one question and they'll talk for 2 hours. And the challenge with those folks is trying to rein it back in and get back to whatever the agenda is. But being really focused on them is the key. And in order to do that, you have to not have to be worried about your own stuff. So if you have personal stuff going on in your life, financial challenges is something that salespeople deal with a lot. Salespeople typically make a lot of money and spend a lot of money. And, they can get themselves in a situation where their lifestyle continues to increase, but their commission doesn't increase in step. And before you know it, they get in a tight spot and they start getting stressed out and they start focusing on the sale. And that's their primary focus, and their conversions go down, their cancellations go up, and things just sort of unravel. So the easiest time to make a sale is right after you made one. Right? Because you're on a high, you're not stressed. It's like, oh, I just had a sale. I can't wait for the next one. But the key is to wake up every day and understand that this is the only day we have. We do not have, tomorrow is not guaranteed. We only have right now. So rather than focus on all of the things that may or may not happen in the future, let's just focus on the one thing that we can do right now. What is one thing? If I know I want my future to look like this, what is one thing I can do today that will hopefully put me a step closer to that future, right? And leave all of that future out there. That's really what's causing people to have so much stress right now, is they're focused on a destination, some sort of salvation at the end of the rainbow.
And they're not focused on the process.
The process, and the salvation is right now, right here. I heard Mark Lack talking about the process just the other day, about focusing on the journey and not the destination.
Totally.
And that's it. Like, if you're not having fun today, you're not going to be having fun 5 years from now.
That's true.
And if you want to be having a good life, a certain life 5 years from now, you got to start living that life today. You might not have all the material things, but you got to get your mindset right, and you got to start treating people the way that you need to treat them in order for your life to end up the way you want it to be, So.
Ryan Stewart preaching today. Ryan, so you just kind of described the person who I think a lot of us have sat down with. I've sat down with this person that just wants to talk and talk and talk. And that's easy. It's easy to start a conversation with that person, have a good conversation with that person.
Sure.
Talk about the opposite of that. Talk about it's typically a guy. It's typically like an older man in my experience, where I go out to a house when I'm looking at a house and he's like, well, go ahead. Just go look at it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, do you want to show me around? No, everything's open. Just go. And like, you can't, he won't engage with you. Give us some tips. How do we get people like that to engage with us?
Well, what you're describing is, we see that a lot with engineers. I've had thousands of conversations like that. I worked for the home improvement division for Sears. So probably 7,500 of those consultations were in-home consultations where I had to meet with the homeowner. I've never met him before, show up at the door, meet them. 3 hours later, I'm walking out with a contract for a $60,000 or $70,000 kitchen remodel, and they're wondering how in the world that happened, and I'm wondering how in the world that happened, but it did happen. It happened over and over again. And so when I came across guys like that, the tendency is to try to force them into the conversation. If they're totally cold, you're better to just not try to engage at all at that moment. Just say, oh yeah, thanks, man. I'll do a walk around and I'll circle back with you. Can we just chit chat in about 5 minutes? It'll take me about 5 minutes to do my walk around, and go do your walk around and make your normal bullet points, and then sit down with them at the kitchen table and go through those things. And by the way, people make decisions at the kitchen table. They don't make decisions as much on a couch. They don't make decisions as much standing on a front porch or sitting on a porch swing. People make real decisions at the kitchen table.
Why?
If you can, I wish I could tell you. It was one of the first things that I was taught when I went to work for Sears. I had Fortune 100 sales training with them. And one of the first things they said is, you've got to meet people at the kitchen table. And for a while, I didn't really believe it. But then over time, I started seeing that the urgency wasn't there. If I wasn't, there's some people you can't get to the kitchen table. Like, I've met with people that literally were almost bedridden. They had to be in a specific chair in the living room. Maybe they had, Parkinson's or some other type of thing that wouldn't allow them to go to the kitchen table. And in that situation, I would do my best, but I was always noticed that the urgency for them to make a decision right then and there it just wasn't high enough. So with a guy like that, you don't want to fight him. You don't want to fight him, but you do want to get his attention. You got to get that guy laughing, and you got to stroke that guy's ego. Okay. And so you got to, first of all, when he's, if somebody said that to me, just go around, I'd say, all right, hold on just a second. All right, I think we can do this deal for $60,000, and just like throw out a random, really low ball number and have him go, what are you talking about? You haven't even done your walk around. Say, I know, man, but I've got x-ray vision. I'm able to see all the way through the house. It blows people away, but just go with me here. Get them laughing, right? And then just, of course, take the pressure off. Hey man, I'm just kidding. Obviously I can't see around the house, but look, part of my process is I go around the house and I look at things that need attention. And I understand that you've probably got a lot of things on your plate right now, but would it be okay if we just did a quick walkthrough just so I can ask you some questions? Because I'm going to see some things, and invariably I'm going to have questions for you. It's just easier if we can just do that together. Will that be okay? All right, sure, whatever, yeah, let's go. And you've got him in tow with you. And while he's walking with you, that's when you want to start having a normal conversation. So Bill, how long have you lived here at the house? Really? Wow. Did you do this painting? No, you didn't. Start talking to them about their house, about themselves. Get Bill to open up, and Bill's going to start telling you about some of his accomplishments. He's going to start telling you, yeah, well, I was with so-and-so. Wow, really? That's amazing. Don't feel like you have to force conversation around something that is important to a person if you don't have any direct experience with it, right? If you're not an expert fisherman and you see a guy's got a boat, just because he loves fishing and he's got a boat doesn't mean you need to be talking to him about fishing. If you truly are a fishing guy and you're totally all about it, then by all means talk to him about it. But again, whatever you do, don't go too far down the rabbit hole trying to build too much rapport. People are not meeting you to make a new friend. People are meeting you to get a deal done, right? So when you leave that person, they should always feel better about themselves than before they met you. So however they felt before you met them, when you leave their home, they should be feeling better about themselves, and they should really love you. They should really love you. And if they don't, then it's a mindset issue or it's a sales process issue. And that's where I see guys making the biggest mistake, is they get so hung up on the rapport building process. And they think in order to build rapport, I've got to find things that are in common with that person. Not necessarily. You really just need to figure out what's important to them, let them talk about it a little bit, and then steer the conversation back. Keep steering the conversation back to what it is that you're trying to do, whether it's come up with a ARV or whatever the situation is for a home. Just, gradually go back. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little.
No, it's great. It's great. It's awesome. What did you just say a second ago? You said something like, don't build too much rapport. Don't spend too much time building rapport. That's kind of counterintuitive to what a lot of us have been taught. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're trying to, if you're building rapport naturally, it's one thing. But if you're intentionally trying to build rapport, it's a mistake. So you should never be forcing yourself to try to find ways to build rapport. You should just have a conversation. Like you walked up off the street, you ran into this guy, even though you may have an appointment with him. Hey, Bill, I'm Ryan. Nice to meet you. Got a beautiful home here. I mean, if there's something you can genuinely compliment it right away. But don't come up with something like, oh man, I just love your gazing ball here. Yeah, my wife put that in the yard 6 years ago. I don't know anything about it. Anyway, why are you here again?
Yeah.
So just make the conversation real. Don't try to force building rapport. Building rapport happens by being open and transparent about who you are and sharing an openness in yourself. And that gives them permission to be open with you in a way that they probably haven't had permission to do in a very long time.
So you weren't saying don't build rapport. Or don't spend too much time building rapport. You were saying just don't do it with a false sincerity.
Yes, don't do it. Don't try to force it to happen.
Gotcha.
And also, once it starts happening, don't feel like you need to stay there indefinitely. They as much as they enjoy it, eventually they've had enough and they want to get back to the process. So you're there to do business. Time is money, so take the time you need for them to become comfortable with you. But once you feel that you've got a good connection, go ahead and keep pushing the process forward, until you get to the end of the sales process.
And then before we go, I want to ask you about just closing. Because you mentioned that earlier, you didn't really want to get into a lot of terms, but obviously I think all of us can relate to a close. Mm-hmm. When maybe we feel like we've kind of pushed their energy level up a little bit, and we feel like they might be in a maybe a state of mind to be able to hit that low number that we need to get that house at. It sounds like, what do we do? How do we transition? I think every situation is probably going to be a little bit different, but give us maybe a tip or two on how we kind of transition to actually get that contract signed.
Okay. So again, another Covey quote: a man or a woman convinced against his or her will is of the same opinion still. A man or woman convinced against his or her will is of the same opinion still. I can get anybody on paper. If I need to get you on a contract, I can get you on a contract. Is that a solid contract? Not necessarily. You'd rather have a solid deal. In order to have a solid deal, you've got to get them coming to you. So it's an art of applying a little bit of pressure and backing off, a little bit of pressure and backing off. It's kind of this seesaw where you're making suggestions or recommendation about next steps, but you're also cognizant, you're watching their body language. And if you see that they start to back up or close their arms, or there's anything about them that's about to say no, then you want to try to divert that a little bit and sort of reposition it so that they can have another opportunity to say yes. Once someone has dug their heels in and said no, it's very, very difficult to change their opinion at that point. So I tell people the biggest way to deal with objections is to handle all of them before they come up.
Right.
Handling objections after they come up is very difficult. So getting back to the close, my whole life I've heard, and been taught, even in corporate America, you have to ask for the sale. You have to ask for the sale. I've probably only asked for the sale a handful of times in all of my sales career. You don't have to directly say, so would you like to move forward with this? Will that be cash, check, or charge? Or would you like to do, you don't have to get that deliberate about it. You can just say, so Bill, listen, we've done the walk around and, typically my next steps are this, and so I don't know how you feel right now. You've got to feel that out. You don't want to go for the close too quickly. Like if you're telling Bill, hey, I'm out looking at a bunch of properties and I'm working with a bunch of investors and we're doing deals every day, and then Bill feels like you're trying to pressure him to make a decision, you've just given up all your posture, But if Bill looks at you and you've built a lot of rapport with him, and, he's looking at you and maybe he even says, well, what are the next steps? I mean, if you feel like he's not ready to commit, or that maybe he needs to speak to his spouse, maybe his spouse isn't there or her spouse isn't there at the time, back off. You're always better to back off. Listen, Bill, I tell you what, I know this is a big decision for you. And if you decide to move forward with us, I want you to feel great about it. why don't we do this? Your wife's coming home this evening at 5 o'clock. Why don't you guys have a conversation? I'll circle back to you tomorrow morning. We'll see if this might be a fit. Okay, great. Walk away. Like, that takes a lot more internal fortitude than trying to just hammer the sale out right there, because Bill is going to be able to convince his wife way better than you are.
Yeah.
Right. So if Bill does a contract with you and then his wife comes home the next day and says, absolutely not, now you're trying to overcome a third party objection that you just can't overcome. So you're better off pulling back, relieving the pressure. You know, a lot of people call it a takeaway close. Right. I would much rather, and a takeaway close is intentional. It's like, I'm going to take this away from you and you're going to want it. You know, that's not what a takeaway close is. A takeaway close truly is respecting where that person is in the process. If you sense that that person is not like, all right, Brian, let's do this. If they're not at that point, then you've got to back off a little and continue the conversation until you can get to that point. Or if you feel like there are things in the way that will not allow you to get to that point on that first call, then you need to just back off and say, hey, listen, this is a big deal to you. Why don't we take a breather here? You think this over. Like I said, we're doing deals everywhere. I'd love to do this deal with you. But at the end of the day, I want you to feel great about working with us, and know that we care more about you than we do just about your deal. We really and truly want to help people. And hopefully our conversation today has shown you that. Yeah. And, leave there like no other salesperson has ever left there, or no other, real estate investor has ever left there. Most investors, they go around the house, they eyeball a few things, they make a few ohs and ahs. Ooh, that looks bad. Oh, there's a hole in the siding. Oh, there's a hole in the floor. Oh man, that's going to cost $10,000. And they do this huge checklist, and then they start engaging Miss Jones right there, and just blowing her mind with everything that needs to be done. She's overwhelmed. You've got to meet people where they are. If you meet a guy and he's urgent, he's like, man, I need to get this done right now. Okay, great. But you still got to go through the same process. You still got to build the value in what it is that you're offering. Mm-hmm. And the way that you build the value in real estate, especially in rehabbing, is by doing that walk around that you're talking about with the homeowner, where you're literally talking about all of the potential problem areas and what it's going to take to fix that. And you're building up the value of all the work that's going to have to go into that to be able to realize the sale price in order for you to make a profit, for it to be worth your while. So you have to build that value just like you do with any other product. And that takes time, and it doesn't always happen on the first close, So
yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think it's important that you said that too, because I think, like almost 75% of the deals that we do is with some sort of follow-up, is some sort of like getting them later. Like I think a lot of people don't understand that it's okay to leave there without the contract.
Totally. In many cases, it's better. And we have a credo that is the fortunes in the follow-up. Mm-hmm. The fortunes in the follow-up. You have to have a bulletproof follow-up system. You have to have a system where you're touching your leads at least once a week, and the relationship, the conversation just starts when you meet them. That's the beginning of it. If it happens to end on the first call, that's great, but you need to be completely okay with it not ending on the first call. And you need to be going in there, not with the idea of, I'm getting this property under contract today. Go in there with the idea of, I'm uniquely qualified to help this person in their particular situation. I'm going to figure out exactly what their needs are. What's their why? What's their vision? Why are they wanting to sell right now? Where are they wanting to go? Yeah. I'm going to get to know this person, and then I'm going to do everything I can to help that person, even if it means steering them to someone else. Even if it means showing them someone else. Maybe there's a situation where I just know I can't help that person. Maybe there's some foundational issues, and I say, we can't deal with that. But I've got a guy that works on foundational issues, and his name is Bill, and here's his number. Yeah. And in fact, I'll put you guys on a text thread together and introduce them to Bill. Now you've just helped them with something, even though right then and there you can't close that deal. At that point, he's going to be very appreciative, and he's probably going to get Bill to do the work. Bill's going to fix the foundation, and now you can re-engage to see if you can get the deal done. So yeah, absolutely. The fortune is in the follow-up, and that's another area that salespeople fail tremendously in. Yeah. By nature, we are very lazy people. And we want instant gratification, and that's a challenge in sales. You can't always expect instant gratification, especially the bigger the tickets are. So the higher the ticket price is, the longer you need to be willing to engage that prospect in order to convert.
Or in our case, the bigger the gap between retail value and wholesale, the value that we need to get it for, which is a lot of times 40 and 50 cents on the dollar. So there's lots of good stuff. Ryan, there's no way we can cover everything about sales in a 30-minute podcast, but I can't thank you enough for giving us some great tips. Before we go, I really want you to spend some time talking about what you've got going on. I know that you're running a couple of companies. You're also doing sales for other companies. You got a lot of stuff going on. What are the top 1 or 2 or 3 things that you really would like our audience to kind of hear from?
Sure. Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah. So the last 3 years I've been working on a project. I don't know if you can see the banners behind me, but Wellness Water Company. I partnered with a guy that was a family friend, known him for years. He went to Jesuit high school with my dad, and he had a water company in New Orleans that had a couple thousand customers, had a really great brand, but he had never thought about expanding outside of the New Orleans, Louisiana area. And I had broken my back. I'd been with Sears for about 15 years, and I was out on medical disability leave trying to rehab, and one day it just hit me. There was a newspaper. I keep it hanging up around here somewhere, but all it said was, beyond Flint, over 2,000 water systems found to have lead levels beyond EPA toxicity limits across the U.S. And it was like, boom, it was right there on the front page of the USA Today. My mind immediately recalled a conversation that I had with Julio, and I picked up the phone and called him. I said, Julio, have you ever thought about expanding your water business? And he said, yes, I've thought about it many times, but I never knew where to start. And I said, well, I've got a pretty good idea. I help Sears expand nationwide, and I'd like to partner with you and take your company nationwide. So that was almost 3 years ago. April will be 3 years. It's been a heck of a journey, but it's my baby right now. I do a lot of other consulting, as you know, for Mike and Joe's company for Unfair Advantage Events. I also have Beast Mode Sales, which is a sales training company. But I'm more focused right now on the water company. That's my primary focus. And actually, we developed a new program where I get to do a lot of what I like, which is what I really like is being out in the field, and I really like training new people. And so the new process that we've developed with wellness has allowed me to do both. There's a way that we can bring sales consultants on board, and I can mentor them while they work for the company. And that's been very, very rewarding for me. So that's what's going on. Yep.
And you used to live in the greater Birmingham area, which is where I am. So you have a lot of connections here, and you have installed a lot of your water systems here too. Tell people how they could learn more information about that. You have a website or something like that?
Yeah, so you can go to besthomewater.com. That's our primary website. Also, we're doing a webinar, a weekly webinar. So depending on when this airs, if they're interested, I can get them a link to the live webinar.
Awesome.
And we started doing webinars because all of the water quality data is now published online. It's available to you, to me, to anybody that wants to look it up. The water quality report is right there. So there's no need for us to go out into homes and do all this extensive water testing anymore. We already know what's in the water. So we're able to cover that on the webinar and show people exactly what's in their water right there on the spot. So yeah, anybody that has an interest, we're always hiring good people, and love Birmingham. I mean, my wife and I lived there for 1.5 years, and we kicked ourselves when we moved. We moved to Dallas. We felt like, in retrospect, it was the biggest mistake we ever made moving. Birmingham's a very special place. You got 4 perfect seasons. They don't ask you if you go to church. They ask you what church you go to. They instantly bring you in, and they want you to be part of the family. And it's just a great place to raise a family. So we do miss Birmingham a lot, and I'm always excited when I get to go up there and see some of the installations that we've done and meet with some of the homeowners that we've installed systems for out there. It's been great. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough, not only for coming on the show and sharing your expertise, but I want to personally thank you. We've obviously been personally involved here for the past couple of years, just through some stuff I've got going on. And I really appreciate you. And guys, when I say this, Ryan is one of the very best and he's an encourager too. He really encourages me because I think we all need to get better at sales. I think all of life is sales, or at the very least, we're selling ourselves, right? If we weren't selling ourselves, we wouldn't wake up in the morning and take a shower.
That's right.
So we're all at least selling ourselves. So I think it's important to have these skills. And that's why I want to have Ryan on the show. And I can't thank you enough, man, for everything you do. Really do appreciate you.
Right back at you, brother. Really appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We love you so much. We got some incredible guests on tap that are coming up very soon. So hit subscribe. We love you. We'll see you next time.